You're listening to Arsenal Pass, a flesh and blood podcast for players by players. And all about strategy, leveling up, and the latest news in the world of Wraith. Welcome to Arsenal Pass.
Yeah, I mean, we just went down the Hudson, went for a walk, and saw the city and spent some time with Alex from Fabled Academy, which was fantastic. Like, first of all, what he's doing for this game and what he's going to capture at this weekend with the Pro Tour. I know he's going to Madrid. He's going to the Pro Tour in France. I mean, effectively, he's going to chronicle what is the start of Flesh and Blood's pro events from Pro Tour 1.
Yep. Amazing cinematography as well. We had some good questions in the interview. The one particularly I liked was about what Hayden was waiting for back at home. And then we had a nice contrast with my answer. He'll throw some people for the loop, but it's just the classic BS that comes out of my mouth whenever we start to get serious.
Well, anyway, quick shout out to Alex at Fabled Academy. If you aren't following Fabled Academy on Twitter and YouTube, make sure you go and do so. Alex at Fabled Academy is recording interviews with players here. Like, just go and watch his first video that he did from, I think it's from Cookout in the ProQuest season, which is phenomenal. Go and check it out, which is Fabled Academy on YouTube. But anyway, Brennan, Arsenal Pass, we're sitting right next to each other. Episode 57. We're episode 57. So we don't have notes today because we're actually just sitting in our Airbnb recording this podcast before we go to the players' banquet in a few hours. So if the pod is a little bit later than usual, we apologize. But
Yeah.
we wanted to be shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah, so the way it lined up is just like we could not find a time. It was a tough week because for me, I had to get a lot of things sorted before I flew to New York, and then Hayden was kind of just flying while I was here. So
Yeah, you had to get sorted. I had to fly for a day and a half to get here. You just had to get on a 4-hour flight.
Yeah, so I brought the microphone. We have it currently sitting in a glass right now, sitting up.
This is peak technology. Yeah, we've got a little like cup and the mic sitting in there while we hunch over it together side by side, like friggin', Quasimodo over here.
Yeah. So Hayden, predictions for the Pro Tour, mostly from like a demographic standpoint, and for what we'll convert. Right, we got a lot of people from a lot of different places across the world flying in for this weekend. Let's say we go into day 2. Where do you expect a lot of the representation to be?
Yeah, in terms of geography.
Yeah, geography.
Yeah, I think the majority of players are still going to be from North America, so in the US in particular, is going to make up. So I think they said around 250 players for the Pro Tour. I think 150 of those are going to be from the US. So I think it's going to be about 60% of players are going to be from the US. So I expect to see that convert to day 2. But, Fab Twitter is amazing. We've just seen a bunch of people tweet they're here. It seems like there's so many people here. I feel like there's
really?
Gonna be, I don't know, just like there's the German team, there's the Polish team, there's some, heaps of players from New Zealand. There's, I think from Australia alone, there's 15 people that have come over that I know of. I think that are going to be playing. Might even be more, actually. That's just the ones I definitely know of. It could be 25 players, and I think half of those are playing in the Pro Tour. But people have come just for the calling, which is amazing. Wow. So, back to the question at hand, I guess, if we're talking about making some predictions for this Pro Tour, I think heading into day 2, we're going to see a good representation of North American players. I think Europe is really going to represent. It just feels like there's a lot of fire and hearing from these European players. We just spent time with Alex at Fabled Academy talking about how fired up the German team are and stuff. And it might be a bit of a rivalry starting between us. But
one of us, you were talking some smack on that video.
Yeah, I was.
I don't know if they're going to take that very well.
That was the UK team, though.
Yeah.
So.
Oh my God, yeah, they're not going to like that.
What about you? What do you think? So I think the one that might surprise people is I think that the Oceania APAC region might not be as represented as maybe people think on day 2, and that's not just because I'm not throwing shade. I just think that there's a lot of different factors and reasons, and there's less players overall. But yeah, I don't know. I just have this feeling that we're going to see Europe and North America really represent here.
Yeah, so there's 2 narratives, and it's funny because they're polar opposites, right? There's the narrative that New Zealand, it's mostly New Zealand, right? Australia kind of gets lumped in, but the New Zealand is the pinnacle of competitive Flesh and Blood, and that their armories are basically our callings, right? This is the meme to talk about. But this is really the first premier stage where we get to put that to the test. And sort of in that time, since the game's inception, the North American scene particularly, but also Europe, has just gone through the ringer of competitive events. We've been sort of forged by fire through the callings,
the last few months,
skirmish season,
battle hardens.
Yeah, so there's just so many good players have sort of been
You've done this way more eloquently than I have. That's exactly kind of what I meant. Is that just the Oceania and stuff. We haven't had as many events recently, and there's a lot of like I can see fired up.
Yeah, a bit complacent, right? Like, I think that, and like even Matt Rogers talks about it a lot. Is that he thinks that the sort of, and this is coming from that region who's prolific and has played quite a few tournaments over here at this point. And he pretty much agrees. Like the skill level of players is just. Like the floor, right, seems to be increasing pretty fast, or at least the average.
The gap's disappearing quickly. Yep.
So I'm definitely. I think North America is going to convert well in terms of like top 8 representation. It's really hard to say. But one thing I do want to transition to, Hayden, is like what kind of decks are we going to see? Let's bring it back. Let's bring it back. Legend Story Studios, in their infinite wisdom, decides to make a ban and restricted announcement. They push it. They push it later, right? Push it a month later, pretty close to the Pro Tour. It's going to create a fun, new format, exciting. It's going to reward deck builders. The people that are going to put the work in. We did get that announcement earlier that we expected. But how do you think that played out? You think there's going to be a lot of spice? Is there going to be a lot of diversity? Have people enjoyed that system, right? New, fresh meta, right? It's not boring and stale. What has been, I know we've talked a little bit about our experience, but overall, what have you seen from other people and how do you get it out?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of things through Twitter and just having conversations as well. And people are being a bit more vocal in the past week about how they're feeling and how they are coming into this Pro Tour. And I feel some sentiments for some players. Some people feel really prepared, right? And maybe those people are a bit quieter because they're ready to go. And, they're not saying, I'm feeling a bit unsure about things. But overall, I think it's a real mixed bag in terms of how players are feeling. I think people have looked for innovation and looked to be innovative and try to find these things. And maybe they haven't been there to compete with Star of the Show, like Bravo, Star of the Show, and Chain in the ways that people would like to.
Yeah. And
it's been quite difficult to find decks that Star of the Show is still very real. I think it's still going to be the most played deck tomorrow. Maybe Chain is more played when we rock up to the Pro Tour tomorrow. But those two decks are going to be the top 2 played decks. And it's not even a question in my head, right? Like,
yeah, I 100% agree. I think that it's no question. It's maybe a flip of whether it's more Starvo or more Chain. But those are the decks to beat. And they're quite different decks too, which is really interesting. And that's it's cool for diversity, quote unquote. But I think that ultimately, like it constrains the meta quite a bit because you have to attack to an extent 2 very different decks, right? And it's really hard to have a deck that's good into Starvo that's also good into Chain. So we see some sort of tier 2 or just like meta decks that are quite popular in terms of like Lexi playing into Chain, the Ice Lexi particularly, but has a very rough matchup into Starvo. And then on the other side
of Prism.
Yep. And then there's Prism who has the good matchup into Starvo and then ends up having a really bad matchup Chain, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So it's like, where do you land, right? Are you playing the Chain? Because like if you pick a meta deck, you're likely to fall. You could play into like one of those decks that are preying on you. You could also just lose your mirrors. You could lose your Starvo matchup. So it's hard to be super confident.
Yeah. So I think just going back to like what you said before about what decks to expect. Well, there's those 2 things, right? But I think here's something, right? Frame this, because you talked about a new meta and maybe people feeling a little bit like not as excited about the fact of where we are now, and there's not as much innovation. I said that, but take this, right? Say this is the meta 8 weeks ago. So from release, there was no Scalata, there was no Autumn's Touch, right? And we have this meta right now. It would have been interesting to people. Like, Chain and Starvo and other decks around it are close enough, and there's more competition that it wouldn't have just immediately been like it was when How Good Star of the Show was rocking up into Battle Hardened, I think it was Indianapolis, right?
Yeah.
And then into the indie calling. Like, I don't think, we would have had a lot more representation and the narrative would be different. But because it's been done through a banning as opposed to a release of a set, it's a very different narrative about as we hit into the Pro Tour, because there was already knowns. You take the bannings, and then we head into this format where there's a lot of things that are already solved and already known, like known information.
Yeah.
And that's why I think the format maybe feels a little bit, some aspects like stale, or like people aren't excited about like the innovation that's there compared to how they would have been if it was just from a new set coming in.
Yeah. It's I think people feel frustrated, right? Like they want to be on something that's not Star of the Show, not Chain, because Star of the Show, it still might be the best deck. Chain might be as well, but Star of the Show is probably worse than it was before. So it's hard to really pick the premier best deck between those 2. And I think that the mirrors in both of those decks are, people don't tend to find them to be very enjoyable.
Yeah.
And that's going to be
fine, but
they're fine. The Chain mirror in particular, I think I'm not a huge fan of, but the Starvo mirror, I know that you can be. There's a lot of consistency.
No one's heard about how much you don't like Chain mirrors before. That's news to everyone.
They're worse than they used to be. So, Hayden, when are we dropping this pod?
In a few hours, it's going to come out. for the Pro Tour.
Yeah, so I'm comfortable saying the deck that I will be playing, I think Hayden will be playing. I was born to play this deck, Hayden. I was born to play this deck.
That's fair. I can see it. We've had very contrasting lead up. Let's move on. Let's hold that thought for 1 second. I just want to wrap up the kind of decks we expect to see, and then I want to talk a bit about like our process and stuff as well for this Pro Tour. But I think what we're expecting to see tomorrow is, like you say, like Chain, Star of the Show, and then we're expecting to see decks that are specifically trying to target either of those, and then maybe trying to have a chance into the other. Like you said, the Ice Elixirs, the Prisms. People talking about like Dash as a thing, and I've been working a lot on Dash. It's one of the decks that I've been close to considering playing. I'm going to talk about the process in a minute around like getting to that sort of deck and stuff. But it's, what we end up seeing tomorrow, I don't think it's going to be too massive a deviation of what people expect. Hell, we could get there tomorrow and be super surprised about what people are playing. But I think at this point, people have been pretty open about feeling like Chain and Star of the Show are the two best decks by quite some margin. And, I actually think it's healthy. I think this meta is like pretty reasonably healthy. I think just expectations of what people thought was going to happen after the bannings isn't quite lining up with what's actually happened. But I don't think if you took it in isolation, just remove the bannings, just look at this format in isolation, I don't think it's not a bad format. It's not, there's things that can be, I think the ProQuest season is going to be a good ProQuest season. I think people are just looking for more innovation than is maybe going to come out. But hey, who knows? Like we're sitting in one little bubble of things, and it's a reasonable sized bubble. We talk to people, but nothing's leaked out about these like crazy decks people have found or anything. So I think there's going to be some surprises tomorrow for sure, because there's going to be decks that people pick up that are known quantities, but they try and maybe target in a different way. But it's not to the point of maybe what we've experienced in the past of just like Lightning Briar coming out, Viscerai coming out, like these things, it's not going to be the same thing. So let's talk a bit about preparation for this Pro Tour, because we've had very contrasting experiences in preparing for this Pro Tour, and I think that's really interesting.
It is contrasting, I think, towards the end. But for a lot of the testing process, we were on the same page. So we started out looking at sort of like fringe decks, trying to really break the game, and then it was just like, I don't know. It's like very tough to break the game.
There were some things, right? But they're not maybe to the level that we want them to be. And
it's tough into a Starvo meta to break the game. Like it's a very constricting deck, and then you have Chain attacking on somewhat of a different vector, and like that's tough. So we messed around with that quite a bit. We did a lot of testing pre-ban, and we were testing relatively close to what the ban actually was, just not the Autumn's Touch part. So Oldhim really fell off our radar pretty quickly, which I was happy to sort of rule that one out. That was more of a Michael Hamilton really helped us out with that, which is very, 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 very good, because I think we would have probably went deep on that deck and spent a lot of development time. And yeah, I think that from the start we were really looking at Chain. We tested a lot of Viscerai. We tested a lot of it because Viscerai is still a very good deck. It's just like the things that it used Scalata to sort of play itself out of some bad matchups doesn't really have that toolbox anymore. So those are a bit tougher. And I don't know if it's faster than Chain now, because people used to say that like, Scalata wasn't like important for aggro, which is the craziest thing I've ever heard, because basically what it did is like you got to play at the same speed or relatively the same speed as Chain, and you would just spike 30.
People talk about how important Husk is in aggro matchups. Well, hold up. You had, don't worry about the 6 defensive. You had 20 damage, 25 damage just sitting there on the board. It's like, obviously there's some setup, but it's not that crazy to do. So Viscerai is very strong. I mean, we spent time with, so I think because we didn't have that much time, right? Like we kind of had an idea of what the banning was, but even before then it was only like 4 weeks, 5 weeks, and then you get 3 weeks once we do find out. Not even that, right? I think it was end up being 20 days or something, 19 days. So with the forward bannings and announcement. So there wasn't time to be just like going too wild on things, but there was like, I guess things we tried before, like go back to like Lexi for a little bit to do this. I spent a lot of, like I said before, a lot of time with Dash, and that's probably where our paths of testing started to deviate. Was where a lot of the team went towards Chain builds after kind of putting down all the kind of fringe stuff. And I went towards this Dash build that I thought was...
and that we gave Hayden that as like his bucket, right? Like Michael's bucket in particular was Oldhim, right? And to an extent Starvo. We all sort of gravitated towards Chain after we kind of started to rule them out, but with Hayden, he has all the data that we have for Chain. At the same time, it's like, okay, you take Dash. If you can break that, that's great. Because if we can have a deck that can sort of, maybe it fatigues Chain, or maybe it just raises him, right? Boost Dash. And then also has like an item inevitability against Starvo, sort of normally, right? If they don't get high rolled, that's a great place to be, because Dash is a very punishing deck into sort of normal decks, like any of the other chaff that you sort of go through in the rest of the tournament. Like you're doing fundamentally very powerful things. You're setting up your items or you're boosting and doing a lot of damage. So I was very interested in that deck, but in terms of like you said, like that word is important, right? Time. We had to just go, Hayden, you take this, you tell us if it's good. If it's good, we'll look at it. But if not, we won't even test it.
Yeah, and in terms of like talk about like diversion. So actually, step back before in case people aren't aware, who were we testing with for this Pro Tour, just in terms of the people that were around and sort of the wider group of testing?
Yeah, so it was myself, Hayden, of course, Dan Mackay as usual. Then we had Michael Hamilton, Roger Bodie, who's he lives in Indianapolis as well, and then Matthew Fawkes. And yeah, so that was pretty much our team for the season. And I think it went really well. We had a lot of good aspects. I know Matt in particular, definitely a shout out to him. He pulled some ridiculous hours this season. Yeah. Like he works very hard. I was very impressed with that. And yeah, I think he was on quite a degenerate schedule. And then Michael and Roger were just definitely a joy to work with. Very analytical, very composed, sort of about their testing, and you fell right into sort of the procedures and discipline that we like to implement effectively. Most of the time.
Yeah, the way Michael's mind works in terms of Flesh and Blood just continues to surprise and impress me. He's got one of the most fantastic brains when it comes to Flesh and Blood that I've had the pleasure of having conversations with at this point. And when I have these conversations, I go, it makes sense that you won 2 callings in a row.
100%, and it's very, very powerful to have someone like him testing with you, in the sense that like we may have gave Hayden dash, but we can honestly just ask Michael. I think to a reasonable extent, I just trust his opinion. I was like, oh, should we be looking at Ultim? It's like, maybe no.
Yeah.
Should we play Star Wars Chain? It's like, yes, no, but for these reasons, and I don't really have to spend kind of do my 10,000 hours or whatever it is to sort of try to master it, because he nails it on the head.
Yeah, you don't need your Blitz Kano sheet back out for every single deck in Classic Constructed. Yeah. So I guess that's like one aspect of it. So that's who we're working with. But then I just wanted to talk a little bit about, because people are probably interested in what happened. So in terms of, you ended up being able to do some in-person testing for the kind of last week, and you've been in New Jersey a little bit longer than I have, where it worked out that my sort of, I think, schedule was really, I couldn't line up with you guys in North America either for testing, which was really tough. So I was probably a little bit more siloed with myself and Dan, who lives in New Zealand as well. So, it's always, we work like that usually just for a sell. It just makes more sense for timing wise, and then report back, have catch ups and things like that, strategy meetings and stuff. But then it got a little bit crazy for me in the past week, and then show up to New Jersey. As we're recording right now, I haven't actually decided what I'm going to play tomorrow. So I have the dash deck that I've been working on, and I'm like somewhat happy with. I have a full game plan set. I know what I want to do in every matchup. I think the deck is just not quite strong enough.
Yeah.
And then also we have like what everyone else is working on the team as like audibles that I'm potentially looking at as well. So.
So we have the chain list. Like we have a very solid chain list.
Yeah, everyone's is slightly different, but,
of course,
but it's all the same theory and grounding.
Well, there's one that's a bit wacky, which I would consider to be sort of the deck. Is it good enough? Can it it attacks on sort of it has a different game plan than a normal chain deck, and is it powerful enough? I'm not sure. That's what we're still flip-flopping between. So we really have the data and we have the tools to play Starvo or Chain, right? I think a lot of us would be comfortable doing that. Those are fine picks. But this is the Pro Tour. I don't want we're not going there.
You don't want mediocre.
Yeah, there's no half split my games. We're trying to get a trophy. So there are some audibles that will require like a gem format, and you have to somewhat kind of gem format it through.
You have to get some luck on your side.
Yes, and maybe with those decks, it's probably overwhelmingly important for us to get into the so-called winners meta as fast as possible, because we will target the meta decks.
Yeah.
I really want this deck to be a surprise though, if we ended up bringing it, because I think we might sort of wimp out last minute, but I think we just call it the deck. I think that it is Flesh and Blood's version of the deck.
Okay, all right.
It is it's wild. It's a wild one. In before 03.
In before 03 I'm like sitting here like talking about like risk aversion and what I want to play. And I think if I wanted a top 32 and to guarantee a PTI for the next event, I would probably look at the chain list that's being played widely in our team that I think is really solid with some great theory behind it. I've got it sleeved up. I've got my plan mostly written out, and then I've got dash, and I feel like that could give me like the high lows. I think there's higher opportunities. There's also much lower floor to it, and then there's like a couple other things. Like Lexi was something I looked at for a while as well, and I felt the same about like just formats and pairings and stuff. So anyway, I want to talk a little bit about, that's a bit of preparation. We're going to talk about more of this next week as we get past the Pro Tour, because we'll have some things to talk about, some results and how the actual event went for the whole sort of like wider group of people that we've been testing with as well. But we're here in New Jersey. We've just, as I said at the start, when we recorded the intro, that we've been out today recording with Alex from Fabled Academy. If you haven't already, go and follow Alex and check out all the great work he's doing for this game. He's going to be documenting history this weekend, which is fantastic. But what else have you been doing in New Jersey before we get into some predictions of this Pro Tour? You've been eating?
Yeah, I've been eating. So I like to make a point of visiting people that I haven't seen for long periods of time whenever I go to a new city. So I was lucky enough to sort of be booked Wednesday, Thursday night for dinners. It was nice, caught up with old friends. Got some great food. So on Wednesday I went to Jean Georges, which is right near Central Park. It's a really nice French restaurant, and then last night was Sushi Katsui, which is right there in downtown West Village. Right?
I think it's in West Village, yeah.
Yeah, so it was amazing. We did like the omakase, and the chef was fantastic. So I had a great time. It's just awesome, actually. We haven't really spent time in New Jersey. We've been in New York.
Yeah, well, I've literally been here for 12 hours.
Yeah.
Not even that?
Yeah. Well, you landed and you showered. Hayden landed, showered in like 5-10 minutes, and then we were out.
I didn't shower. I didn't even shower.
You didn't even shower?
I showered last night. I just dropped the bags. No, I had a quick wash, quick get changed and hot turn, and we went into the city for dinner. So that's New Jersey. It's been a great experience so far. I'm really excited for this weekend. This format of the podcast is pretty different to what we usually do. Usually we go through, Brendan just says I picked up my phone because I've got some things to talk through. Usually we go through the news and then come on and Cookout and lots of different things. I'm just laughing because we've got a little bit of a janky setup, and I told Brendan he cannot touch the table while we record, and he likes to have something in his hands at all times. So no news really this week for the podcast. I mean, in terms of, I guess, things that are happening. We think we might get an Uprising spoiler tonight at the Pro Tour banquet, the Players Banquet. So,
almost certainly.
Yeah, right? Surely. But we're excited. We get to see the banquet tonight. We get to see the panel from LSS. I'm sure we're going to hear some stuff about the game and just the solidification of what's happening with 2.0, and also just welcoming players to the first ever Pro Tour. I think this is going to be an experience. Other things that have happened in the past week. I mean, we have the date and location for Pro Tour number 2. It's happening in Lille in northern France. In the very last weekend of August, which is very exciting. So ProQuest season, that's where it's going to get you an invite to. So if you're out for ProQuest this weekend, best of luck. And
XP as well.
XP, no ELO, which is interesting. I think there's a lot of...
We can talk about that one later. I think that's a bit of a...
Yeah.
Gotta crack that one open.
I'm surprised, definitely.
Yeah.
Actually, am I? I'm a little bit surprised.
I am.
I think I'm actually fine with it to a degree. But again, we're already into the qualification period.
Bit tilting, eh?
It's a little bit... Then again, this makes no difference to me. This gives me a free invite.
Yeah, it doesn't affect us. It's literally like
the
thing is for the entrenched players and things. It's just like we just free roll this stuff, and we complain about it the most because we feel like it affects the normal player base. Like mostly negative.
Well, players who are we've got players coming from Europe and around the world this weekend who are coming in thinking, like if I top 32, cool, I get a PTR. But hey, what if I end up like day 2? Pretty solid record, or I do well in the calling this weekend.
Yeah. Snag some ELO off Hayden Dale.
Snag some ELO off the Brendan Patricks, the Tarek Patels, the Matt Rogers of the world. Maybe I spike a win. And hey, I'm sitting pretty for an invite to France. Unfortunately not. So I think my kind of just general takeaway is that we get ELO next year now. It doesn't mean anything this year. Tell you what though, it makes me more willing to maybe take a punt on a deck this weekend for the Pro Tour. So yeah, very interesting. Any last thoughts before we move on? I've got a Command Cookout question.
Nope, I'm ready.
All right, we're in New Jersey. Head out the back, Brendan. Fire it up.
Sizzle it. Oh, that's a good New York smell. Just wafting over the river.
One thing I'm struggling about in New York is the smell.
Mostly smells like weed.
But it's either weed or excrement, to be honest, which is tough. I've been to a lot of cities in the world, like major cities in the world, and anyway.
I think we were just out by the Hudson.
It's true. It is. I've enjoyed my time so far. Like, it is exactly what I thought it would be in so many ways, the sensory sort of overload of New York, and it's been fantastic, and I'm excited to spend the whole weekend here. First, I'm excited to like spend the weekend around like people I call friends, and then also people I don't necessarily call friends, like Brendan. So it's going to be great. Commander Cookout question. If you two were to play in a Team Blitz event together, who would be your ideal third team member? This is going to be a fun one. And what would each person be on? And this is from Justice on our Discord. Shout out to the community Discord. Before you answer, have a little think about it. If you want to get your question in for the Commander Cookout, you can. as I say every single week, any way you possibly want to. You can little handwritten note and give it to us, slip it to us at the Pro Tour this weekend at the calling, whatever you want to do. You can get them into arsenalpassfab@gmail.com, tweet at us, DM us, put it in the comments below and let us know for the Commander Cookout. Brendan, who's the third player? We won't. First of all, we won't play on a team together, but mainly because we're not going to be. You're going to maybe go to Vegas. Maybe. Yeah. I will be in Sydney because it's my hometown. And so we won't be playing together, but I don't think we would anyway. I don't want to play on a team with you.
So but if there was a dream team,
who's the third?
There's a third, and it's the easiest choice of my life.
Really?
There's a man. He lives in Tulsa, Oklahoma. His name is Stephen Woolley.
Oh, you're taking Stephen.
Some say the better half of Team Covenant over there. But Stephen actually reached out to me about forming an alliance to take down his friend and business partner. And I told him I might be able to get him that W. So we'll see.
That sounds. I feel like I've seen this before in a WWE a Raw episode.
You seen some of those memes people?
I know the memes are great. Yeah. No, look. I mean, I would gladly take Stephen, especially if it's team limited.
Yeah.
Stephen, I think, is a fantastic. I mean, he's a good fisherman player in general, but limited. So you're taking Stephen Woolley? I'm gonna have my own.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have a 4-person team. Okay. So I'm breaking the rules here.
Who are you bringing?
We posted a picture on Twitter last night of the three amigos. I've got to take Sasha Markovic, I think. Yeah,
it'd be nice to call
reunited.
Yeah, it'd be nice to carry him to a hat trick.
How else is he gonna get a call?
Yeah, he's so washed up at this point.
Either that, or I want James White. I want James White on my team. Yeah. I saw there's a little clause in the calling notes that LS's employees can play in the team callings, in the Blitz callings.
Which is wild.
Yeah. And on that note, if you're in Team Blitz calling, what are you playing? I'm probably playing Rhinar, I assume.
So I assume that I'd probably be on the Rhinar as well, because I think that...
No, you can be different heroes. I'm the Rhinar
we're
player.
In the team calling.
Yeah,
okay, so I was thinking about the actual team.
No,
bringing you to Vegas.
No, what are you on?
Yeah, so I'm probably... So I think that the lineup is probably Oldhim, Rhinar, X, and that X might be Lexi, which sounds wild, but X is just something that doesn't play a lot of generics and can sort of slot in very well.
Oh, you're taking it seriously. I thought you were just going to I feel like thematically you would have to be on Kano or
they
Viscerai.
Neutered him.
Well, you can't be on Viscerai, right?
Yeah, they neutered Kano. They took out Stir and Snapback. It's pretty bad.
That's my boy.
What you massacred my boy.
James White's on Cavdine, obviously.
Yeah. So, oh my God. Yeah. You remember that? 2-hour blitzathon?
Stephen Woolley's on Livia or Azalea.
Yeah, or whatever he plays these days. Whatever the worst deck is, he's probably going to...
That's true. But real quick question. Thanks, Justice, for the question. So far, the Blitz calling is now in a few weeks. If you are going to Vegas, what are you thinking is the top decks? Or if you're playing Battle Hardened this Sunday, because we've got a Battle Hardened at New Jersey, what are the top decks for you, do you think?
So I think really sort of the easy win there is going to be Oldhim.
Yeah.
Oldhim didn't take
Feels like the deck to beat now, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. But I think Rhinar is one of those decks.
I think so too. I think Rhinor's in a really good position.
So we're talking about Team Blitz, so it's what's number 3? Probably not Kasai.
I think it's I still don't think it's Kasai. I think it's a deck that either beats up on Oldhim or is just loses to Oldhim but beats everything else. I think that's the deck you take. So Briar sends out to me because I think that's really good into Oldhim and then is still solid into the field. Or I'm just taking a deck like Boost Dash from the last format, which is just a dog to Oldhim.
Yeah.
But I think is really, really good into basically anything else.
Yeah, the Briar's probably the pick, right? You might get fancy and we talk about Tech or we talk about Lexi, but Briar is very powerful.
Yeah, I think if I had to lock in 3 decks for my team right now, I would probably at the moment I'd be looking at taking. I'd probably play Oldhim because I think it's just probably the best. There's probably going to be an Oldhim. The list might look a little bit different to a traditional list, but Oldhim, Oldhim, Rhinar, and Briar. I think with the 3 I would take right now.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's not a very controversial.
No, sorry, Azalea. We're playing Red Line Azalea.
Tri-shot combo.
Yeah. All right, Brendan. That's kind of Cookout. We've talked a bit about our experience so far in New Jersey. This is a shorter pod today. We're doing a bit of a shorter format as we head into the Pro Tour. Again, apologies for probably this episode being late. Apologies for us sitting with our microphone in a glass, hunched over talking. There's no video, so I do apologize, but you get something from us. I want to talk a little about some other predictions for the weekend. I know we did a few weeks ago. We talked a bit about the heroes that you expect to see tomorrow. What are you expecting from the story of this weekend to be at the end of it in terms of Pro Tour 1? Are you expecting that we're going to see something crazy happen, a player that no one knows winning this event? Do you think that we're going to see an already known quantity really solidify their place as the guy, right? Like or the person to be the first Pro Tour winner and to take that mantle and heading forward into France. Like
So I think anybody that is has reasonable success in Flesh and Blood so far and wins, and if that kind of person wins the Pro Tour, they probably get solidified as the best player in the game. That could look like your Matt Rogers, your Sasha's, your Hayden Dales, whatever it is. But if you've had if you've had any amount of success, you gotta have something, right? And then you win the Pro Tour, I think that really puts you on top. Do I think that an unknown player will win the Pro Tour? It's possible, but it depends what you mean by unknown, right? Because they're probably lesser known, maybe, right? But
I think so. I think it's really,
very reasonable. Probable. Very reasonable. There's there's many good players that for one reason or another just haven't made it into like the headlines, but they're just incredible players. So yeah, I'm excited, but I do think that I feel like the top 8 will be recognizable.
I think so. I think here's my prediction. So I reckon we're gonna have 5 players that you know that have had calling one or multiple calling top 8s in their career. I think we're gonna have one person who's never had a calling or a top 8. I think we're gonna have like 2 people who are like either like a nationals winner or a nationals top 8er, and maybe have like a top 16 at a calling. That's my prediction for the top 8.
Pretty congruent that. I don't think the winner is gonna be one of your sort of for some reason, right? That's just my throw.
This format, I think, is very like there's a lot of like different things about this format where people might just pick decks to run well into like a certain half the format, have a good time. Like I think when I say have a good time, I mean like line up really well with what they're trying to do and like find a lot of success. I think this format has. I don't want to get into too much about variance and stuff, but this format, especially when you're playing mirrors in particular, it feels like the choices and the elements of that when it comes to success are a bit more minimized than they have been previously, which I don't think is a bad thing, by the way, but I think it's true. So yeah, to that extent, I think we're going to see.
Yeah, for me, it's just shot in the dark. Like I just got a feeling that this time it's not going to be until Hayden Dale. Well, it can't be Hayden Dale because I'd be winning. Brendan Patrick's got to be taking down that mirror. No, I do think that we will win, though. Like, I think that someone from our group will win.
Really?
I hope so, yeah. I genuinely believe so, which is funny because it contradicts what I just said with, like, a sort of player, because most of us are, at least have had some publicity in the past 2 years.
It's so funny, though. Like, the contrast in our preparation, I feel... This is the event I feel the least prepared for.
I've never felt more prepared in my life.
It's so crazy, the contrast we have right now sitting next to each other.
I think I'm just, manifesting.
Yeah, I think you are too, which is great, which is fantastic. Confidence breeds confidence. And yeah, look, the other thing I want to say about this weekend is don't lose sight of the fact that we've got a calling happening as well. There's going to be some amazing things coming out of the calling. I'm sure we're going to have, an amazing top 8 there as well. It'll be interesting to see the contrast between, because we get Pro Tour day 1 and then calling day 1 the day after, so people get a bit of information in terms of maybe like changing some of the cards in the deck or even changing hero. The meta might change a little bit, so it's going to be really interesting to see the top 8 of the Pro Tour and the top 8 of the calling when we get to that on the 3rd day on Sunday. So I'm really excited to see that. I think if you're not already planning to, tune into coverage. First of all, amazing coverage team.
Mr. Gottlieb, Tannen Grace, DM Armada, as well as Red Zone Rogue. I think that's the lineup.
Flake
as well.
Yeah.
So we got 5.
5 of the best. So yeah, make sure you check it out. And yeah, other than that, I think that's kind of what we want to talk about. Any other predictions that you wanted to throw out? You got any crazy wild theories?
No crazy predictions. I really don't want to play the calling. I would like to make day 2.
Me too.
I think playing the calling would be pretty disappointing.
Yes. Yeah. It's not where you want to
be. As Luke Badger sneaks down our stairs.
Oh my gosh, is that IRA World Premier Champion Luke Badger coming down the stairs? It definitely is. Well, on that note, we're gonna close up the pod, Brendan.
Yeah.
We'll see you all next week. We talk about Pro Tour wrap up and crazy or non-crazy weekend as it may or may not happen.
Well, it's going to be crazy one way or another.
That's true.
See y'all next week.
See you next week.